You're listening to The Empowered Advocate, a podcast from Greensboro Pregnancy Care Center.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Empowered Advocate at Greensboro Pregnancy Care Center. I usually don't host these, but my name is Carter Mundy. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Greensboro Pregnancy Care Center. Mary wanted to invite me to host this episode because the episode is talking about how men interact with the issue of abortion. And so today on The Empowered Advocate, we have Josh Kappes from Love Life. Welcome, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Carter. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. It's nice to have another guy around.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
In an all-ladies world sometimes, I feel like. So let's just start off by talking about a little bit, your background, how you got involved in Love Life, what Love Life is.
Sure.
So if you just want to explain all that.
Yeah, so, by trade, vocationally, a pastor, did student ministry for about 10 years. I'm a Liberty University grad, and that's what I intended on doing. I didn't even want to be a senior pastor. I didn't want to sit behind that desk, but the Lord kind of interrupted that, and I ended up church planting about 6 years ago. About halfway through into our church planting journey, I was invited to a 1-hour journey for pastors to check out this ministry called Love Life. And I had some friends involved with, some sidewalk counseling down there at Latrobe, and had heard some about Love Life, but, didn't really get involved because we're like an hour away. And so I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So I went down there, and man, I was just ruined the rest of the day. I actually have a Facebook video that I made later on, and I'm just weeping in the video, just sharing my experience. And there was a couple things that impacted me that day. One was obviously just the reality of standing in front of an abortion clinic. So few people have actually been to an abortion clinic before. A lot of them are out of sight, out of mind. Most people don't even know where they are in their cities. And so standing out there and seeing real people, we use statistics a lot. We talk about the number of abortions since Roe v. Wade and the number of abortions annually, but a lot of times numbers just get lost on people. And so when you're there and you see real men and real women, you see a physical manifestation of the spiritual battle that takes place. It was very gripping, but I was also impacted by this vision that our founder, Justin Reeder, had to mobilize the church to actually do something, and historically to be pro-life as a pastor, is you support the Pregnancy Care Center, you do Sanctity of Life Sunday, you encourage your people to vote pro-life, and it's beyond that. Like, what else can you really do? Mm-hmm. And Love Life provided this low level of entry that the church can be a part of and be involved in. And I just saw man, this guy really believes that the church can end abortion. And so I called my co-pastor and said, man, we've got to do this. We've got to get our church involved. And so we adopted several weeks of coming out to the prayer walks. And so Love Life is a ministry that exists to unite and mobilize the church to create a culture of love and life that will result in an end to abortion and the orphan crisis. And on a practical level, we do a 40-week journey of hope every year from February to November, where we typically ask churches to host one of those weeks, at least one of those weeks throughout the year, which involves a 4-step process taken from Nehemiah 1 and 2, where on a Sunday we ask them to hear about the tragic truth of abortion, what's taking place in their city. We share with them about the prayer walk. Then on Wednesday, we ask them to pray and fast. On Saturday, we invite them to come to the prayer walk, and we host a peaceful prayer walk out in front of the abortion clinic here in Greensboro, and then also in Charlotte and Raleigh, and God willing in September in Manhattan. And we'll be launching Love Life Manhattan at the end of September. And so then at the conclusion of the prayer walk, I think is the most important part, where we're actually mobilizing people to ongoing ministry. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, several of those things involve you guys: sidewalk counseling, mentoring, orphan care, so foster care and adoption, and just mobilizing the church. And I think for so long, the church has been paralyzed by believing that, we can vote abortion out of our culture. Mm-hmm. And, it just doesn't go down like that. Abortion's a major part of our culture, and what needs to shift in our culture can only be affected really by the church, by the people of God, and not so much by politicians. They're downstream, Politicians are important, and we honor politicians, but they're downstream. They follow culture. They don't create culture. And the church is uniquely positioned to shift the culture. And so we got a glimpse of that last Saturday in Charlotte, where 2 moms showed up to Latrobe Drive, not because they knew there was an abortion clinic there, but because they knew there were Christians there. And
That's cool.
They heard about the mobile unit. They knew there were going to be Christians there on Saturday. And so, we say all the time, the shift we're looking for is that men and women stop running to the local abortion clinic and they start running to the local church. Yeah. And that actually happened Saturday.
That's really cool.
And I know also last week with you guys here in Greensboro, there was a mom from one of our partnering churches that, came to the abortion clinic and connected with one of your Sidewalk counselors here. And we were able to, she was willing to speak to someone at her church that had partnered with Love Life. So she knew, that they would be willing to help. And I don't know the outcome of that, but, those things are starting to happen. And so our goal is to move the needle little by little with all of our partnering churches. You came to a prayer walk. That's fantastic. But what's next? And how can we go deeper on this to not only prevent abortions happening outside of the church, but also inside the church as well. Right. So we rolled out what we call our House of Refuge initiative today with some of our partnering churches in Greensboro, where we're asking partnering churches to just read the House of Refuge statement to their congregation once a quarter. And all it is a statement clearing the air. If you have an unplanned pregnancy and you're a part of this church family, here's what we believe. This is what we won't do. This is what we will do. And preventing abortions from happening even within our churches, where people are afraid of being kicked out or, talked about, gossiped about, where the pastor is taking the initiative to speak clearly, to clear the air, and to say, this is how we can help you. You don't need to go to the abortion clinic, and we'll help. So it's been amazing to be a part of. Somewhere in there, they got me. And so I was asked to host a prayer walk, and one of our COO, Carl, he videoed me hosting the prayer walk, and he sent it to Justin, and they said, we got to hire this guy. And so they offered me a part-time position. Our church was very favorable in partnering with Love Life and allowing me to do that almost like a missionary. Cool. And then about a month and a half in working in Greensboro and Raleigh and opening up our 2 locations, they offered me the opportunity to come on full time. And so I never intended to do this. I'm not some kind of pro-life warrior. I'm just a pastor that I do want to see the body of Christ unified. I do want to see the people of God activated in their cities and engaging with hurting people. Yeah. And so I've learned a lot. I have a lot to learn. I remember one of the times I was here, Abby Johnson came up, and I had no idea who Abby Johnson was. And someone here was like, you don't know who Abby Johnson is? And like, yeah, I'm new to this, man. I'm just a pastor, just, trying to help people. I have a heart for people, and I'm honored to be a part of what God is doing through the church in North Carolina. And we believe that's going to spread throughout the country as well.
I hope so. Yeah. So basically what happened for you is you had somebody show you what was going on at the abortion facility. That's what personally drew you into this.
Yeah, man, my heart was broken. And anybody who goes there, I think it doesn't always take place like that, but most of the pastors that we take out to an abortion clinic for the first time, their heart is broken.
Yeah, I've seen multiple pastors weep at the abortion facility just because they had no idea the darkness and the weight behind what was going on there.
Yeah.
So
it's a heavy place, man. For the first time I was ever out there, this was before Love Life. I just felt like I couldn't even open my mouth. It's just it's a very oppressive environment.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Love Life for that too. I love that they have mobilized the church in multiple ways that at the pregnancy center we never were able to figure out how to do. Because when we have people volunteer with us, there's a lot of asks that go with that, very, very time-consuming, heavy asks sometimes. Yeah. But they needed that initial step, somebody to show them what was going on and what the weight of the issue was. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what Love Life does, and that's why I love it so much.
Thanks, man. With this House of Refuge initiative as well, where we're asking churches to read this statement, what's implicit in there is partnership with pregnancy care centers.
Oh, that's cool.
And CareNet's got a great video that they did a few years ago on how can pastors stop abortions from happening inside the church. Mm-hmm. And they really point out, the necessary relationship between pregnancy care center and church. And I think the church has made a mistake by punting everything to the pregnancy care center.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And everything gets thrown on you guys to fix it all, because that's easier. I mean, it's easy to stroke a check,
right?
And feel like, hey, we did something.
We're partners because we give.
Right. And I know you guys appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah, we need money, right? But man, I'm like you. My heart is that God's plan A for changing the world is the local church.
That's
it's not the pregnancy center. And so what we want to try to do is figure out how, as an organization, to mobilize Christians to minister to people who are facing an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah.
And that's really our heartbeat here at the Care Center too. But
Yeah.
that's why I think Love Life fits in so neatly with what we're doing, is because you're helping people take that first step and introducing them to the problem so that they recognize there's a problem here.
Yeah.
There's an issue that we need to address.
The exciting thing is here in Greensboro is the church really is doing that. The church is stepping
cool.
up. The pastors are stepping up. I'm amazed how many pastors are at prayer walks every Saturday.
That's awesome.
Even though their church isn't the official adopting church. I mean, I think a couple of weeks ago we had like 10 pastors there.
Wow.
A few months ago, one of our pastors actually led the prayer walk here. He did a great job. And that really is our goal. Like, I think a win for us would be that there comes a time where Love Life's not even needed here in Greensboro, and the church and the triad just took over, and just
the
ran
church
with
does it. That's
and
cool.
they're married with, the Pregnancy Care Center here and, the others from the surrounding in the triad area. And there's just, it's just the body of Christ, all of the giftings, all of the roles, the personalities, the passions, all working together to love our neighbor. That will, I think, very quickly bring an end to that place sitting over there on Randleman Road.
I hope so, man.
So
we're down to one now. There used to be more here,
Yeah.
apparently. This was kind of before my time even, but I'm thankful that we only have one to contend with now. And I'm like you, I'm very confident that I think it'll be shut down within the next several years, if not sooner, So that's really cool. Well, that's good to hear about Love Life and about how you got involved. I think let's move on to kind of the topic that we're here to talk about today,
right.
which is why should men be involved in this at all? Because, man, obviously you don't have a uterus. So how can you have,
I do not.
How can you have an opinion on this?
Yeah.
And that's often what we hear people who are pro-choice, pro-abortion saying to us as men that are involved in this. Because Justin, the founder of Love Life, is a man. I know that he had men show him the abortion facility there in Charlotte. I know that you and all of the guys on staff at Love Life, majority men on, maybe now, I mean, that's what it used to be last time we talked. So I know you have a few ladies on there now, but you guys are men talking about abortion, which is couched in the culture as a woman's issue. So what gives you the right to talk about abortion?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's an interesting dialogue because on one hand, there's that issue thrown out, and on the other hand, men are getting thrown under the bus because they're impregnating women and leaving them, and
men are the problem. In other words,
right?
Yeah.
And want to call them to responsibility, and I don't think you can have it both ways. So, I think biblically, you look at Genesis 3 and the story of Adam and Eve. And you see Adam advocate his role to shepherd, to lead, to provide, to protect, and in that void, Eve is deceived and gives into temptation, and a culture of death is ushered into our society, and as a result, I see in men in general, there's two ways that fall impacts us, where we either become heavy-handed and domineering and hurting women, abusive, controlling, or we go the other way of passivity and disengagement. And I think that the way that the Lord has ordered creation to work is when men lead, when they are, Piper uses the term lion-hearted. I think it says, what does he say? Lion-hearted and lamb-like or something like that, where there is a meekness to us, but there is also a courage and a boldness that we have to engage. And so I think for any society to thrive, men have to be leading the way as providers and protectors, motivated out of love, motivated by a desire to care for people well, to care for women well, to care for children well. And any time that we see injustice, anytime that we see creation being harmed, anytime we see God's glory being affected, and all of the major cultural issues of our day, they all have one common thread. It's the image of God. Gender issues, marriage issues, the issue of life, the issue of racism, all of those go directly to Genesis 1 and 2 in the image of God being in the earth. And so when we see that, I don't really care what gender you are at that point. We have an obligation to speak. We have an obligation to engage. We have an obligation to uphold the good design and creation of God, because we know that when humanity lives within the design that God's given us, everyone wins, everyone flourishes, everything functions the way that it's supposed to function. So, I've been told, I had a dialogue with one of the escorts out at a Woman's Choice here in Greensboro. And, I asked her, because she claims to be a believer. I've seen videos where she, said she was a believer. She knew some of the worship songs that we were singing.
Wow.
And I said, I want to ask you a question. I said, how do you kind of rationalize in your mind that God is okay with this? And her response to me was, well, how do you think it's okay for you to be out here telling women what to do?
Right.
And I was like, well, you didn't answer my question, but I'll answer yours. And, but just saying, like, I'm not here to tell someone what to do, but I am here to hold up what's right. And I am here to speak and to offer other options, as is what you guys are doing as a ministry. Almost every day of the week, you guys are out there, and we're offering another way. And so, I think when men go one way or the other, when we are passive and disengaged, or when we are domineering and controlling and manipulative, society suffers.
Yeah.
But when we function in the way that God's created us to be courageous and bold, to be protectors, to be providers, to be motivated by love, that society will thrive. And I think that's what, for me, it's not like, bro, I hate getting up early in the morning. Like I could think of a lot of other things that I could do on Saturday mornings than go out and prayer walk in front of an abortion clinic. But like, I feel like we're needed. The church is needed in general, but men are needed. And I think there's a lot of ways that plays out, and we'll probably dialogue more about that, like the specifics.
Let's actually take a short break real quick, and then we'll dive into some of the specifics of how that plays out in the church. So we'll take a break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, well, we're back from our break at the Empowered Advocate here, and I've got Josh Kappes from Love Life, and we've just been talking about and scratching the surface really on the issue of abortion and how men should or shouldn't be involved. And from our perspective as Christians, obviously we think men should be involved, because either, like you said before, we're pushed to being the problem because we're overbearing and domineering, or we're the problem because we're being passive and we're not engaging in issues. And the culture kind of almost beats us over the head with both of those things sometimes in one way or another. And we're pushed out of the conversation altogether because we have no uterus, and so we have no opinion on it. It's not our body and all of these different things. But as you talked about from the Christian perspective, from the biblical perspective in Genesis, Adam was being passive because he was given the responsibility. And so that plays out over and over again in the culture throughout history. Yeah. That's the Christian worldview. I think that's a really good point to talk about, because when we follow God's design, it leads to human flourishing. But I also think there's a flaw in the logic when people of the culture who are pro-choice or pro-abortion kind of think this way too, which is that men should have no bearing because it's not our body, but somehow we should not speak on moral issues or issues that we believe are moral. And to me, like you said right before we went on the break, I don't care whether you're a man or woman or whatever, we should be able to stand up for what we think is right. And I think that's kind of the issue at hand. But that's us having an opinion on it, right? And so I'd like to talk about, maybe get into more, should we go beyond just having an opinion? And if so, what should that look like? And what do we mean by that, Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned in my short time being out at abortion clinics, just observing, is that's puzzling to me is, abortion being so much about women's empowerment and women's rights and all those things. But abortion actually provides an avenue for men to remain boys, for men to sleep with whoever they want to, and be completely advocated of their responsibility to actually be a father.
Or even a significant other in a relationship, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so we see that. I mean, I know we could bring your team in here, and I'm sure they could share numerous stories of, how they've seen men drop a woman off at an abortion clinic and then sit in their car and play games on their phones and, and just be scot-free. I mean, just say like, I don't want to do this. So, I'm going to pay, maybe not even pay for her to have an abortion and just be gone. And our culture as a whole is elongating that transition from boyhood to manhood, where men are living at home longer, men are addicted to their phones, they're addicted to video games, they're addicted to pornography, all of those things. And so, you have a heightened sexual culture that's delaying manhood, and abortion just provides an avenue for that to continue to happen,
right?
Without bearing the consequences. And so I think one of the ways that we as Christian men can play a role in this is by speaking into younger men.
That's good.
Discipling, engaging with them, speaking clearly into our student ministries, like, hey, let's take 20 minutes less of playing some stupid game where a kid pukes and, everybody's having a fun time. But like, let's talk about things that really matter. Let's equip this next generation and help them understand what it looks like to be a man. The issue of pornography is so prevalent, not only outside the church, but inside the church. This mentality that's ingrained in a man's brain and in his DNA to learn how to view a woman as an object, as something to be consumed, rather than a person made in the image of God to be served and loved and cherished and protected, provided for. And so I think one of the ways that we as men can be involved in the pro-life issue, where what gets thrown at us is we shouldn't tell women what to do. Well, one of the ways that we can say we're engaged is by, hey, we're helping boys become men. We're helping hold young men to be accountable, and even older men to be accountable who still, haven't hit that yet. But speaking that into the culture, and even, when we're out there as men, speaking to other dads who are out there. I mean, there is a huge need for male sidewalk counselors. There's a huge need for men to be out there speaking to those fathers who are sitting in the car. I mean, Absolutely. I remember, we have a code of conduct as Love Life, and we don't engage with anyone. But there's times I'm out there and I'm not Love Life, and there was a dad who came and dropped a woman off, and one of the escorts was blasting music on her car, and this dad came out of the clinic and started dancing in the street to the music. And then a worship song came on, and him and one of the escorts started singing along to the worship song. And at that point, my head was about to blow off my shoulders. And, and just seeing that, I think, who better to speak to that? And actually, Charlotte tried to, I believe it was Charlotte, one of your nurses here, tried to speak to the gentleman, and he was very rude to her. And so I spoke to him and challenged him and what he was doing. Yeah. And I think there's a place for that. I think there's a place for mano a mano, for men to be speaking to men. And again, not in we don't have to like puff our chests out, and it's not like some kind of like shooting contest, but again,
but this is what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
And you need to see this. Man, I think that's really interesting that you bring that up, because somebody who's not Christian, or somebody who may be pro-choice or pro-abortion listening to this is going to say, well, that's super sexist.
What, that we would...
That we're going to try to teach people how to be a certain gender, Oh. And I think that's so interesting to me, because to me, it goes back to the question of human flourishing, though.
Right.
What is going to help our human race flourish more? Is it absolving all gender? Because last time I checked, it still takes two biological genders to create children and to perpetuate the human race.
Right.
But secondly, when you talk about what men should and shouldn't be doing, and you try to say, well, there's no gender involved, then you completely absolve men of having to act like men in a way that's going to promote human flourishing.
Right.
And they can all of a sudden just do whatever they want and define themselves however they want.
Yeah.
So that you can't say any of that to them.
Yeah,
I think that's the problem.
This is the muddiness that we get in a relativist society.
Right.
When truth is removed, everything loses its meaning. Mm-hmm. Everything becomes muddy. I'm not a sociologist, so I can't sit here like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and start throwing out all these studies and everything. But I think time will certainly show, as there's more of this madness trending towards gender fluidity and all of that, how we will see the societal impacts. But I think that we can rest assured, again, from a biblical worldview, Genesis 1 and 2, in the beginning, God made them, male and female, he created them in his image. And there's a distinctness in those roles. There's a complementarianness, whatever the word is, but there's a way that the roles are meant, the genders are meant to work together that leads to the good of society. There are things that men are uniquely created and shaped to do that a woman cannot. Mm-hmm. And I know our society wants to say, oh, you shouldn't say that. And absolutely vice versa. There are things that a woman can do and she's uniquely designed. And in both of those, man, there should be great joy in that. There should be, we should exalt in the goodness and the creation of God and in his wisdom and how he's created us uniquely in those roles. And again, in those roles, they're linked to the image of God. And there's a mystery there. But you see that very clearly. He's made in the image of God, male and female, he created them. And so as the church, which is the pillar and buttress of truth, I don't know what buttress means. Sounds important.
Some kind of support.
Yeah. But we have got to stand on the foundation of truth, regardless of how popular or unpopular it is. And again, it's not the Benham brothers just wrote a book. I think it was Bold and Broken or whatever. I think that's a good analogy. Like, we have a spine, we have conviction, but we're not arrogant either. Jesus, good. I think, uses, or one of the New Testament somewhere talks about, I think it's Peter's writings, answering with gentleness and respect, right? Yeah. So we can be convicted and we can be firm, but we also can be humble as well. Right. And I think that's the approach that we want to take. Society can say what they want to. The church has to stand on a biblical worldview and the truth of Scripture and not bend on those things regardless of popularity, because if the Bible is God's word, we got to stand on it. There's a series that I did at our church a few years ago called Culture and the Gospel, and the very first message was, God has spoken, do you trust him? Because that's the foundation of everything. Like, either God has spoken into our world and we trust him or we don't. Like, if he's the creator, he's the only one uniquely qualified to speak into our existence and say, this is how this is supposed to work. And we either believe him or we don't. And we as Christians, we believe him. And so we need to uphold what he has said is good. And so, this idea of men being men is something we need to hold to. I think we need to be careful with that sometimes. I know Chandler talks a lot about painting this idea of manhood as like, you got to watch football and eat chicken wings and
have that bravado,
right.
And all that.
I think it's real simple. I think it's providing and protecting, I think, are the things that
maybe sum up what God has designed men for in the world, for human flourishing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good, man. I think that's important because I think there's nothing less than human flourishing at stake in that, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the key here is trying to find common ground with somebody who's pro-abortion, pro-choice, or gender fluidity, all that kind of stuff, and say, hey, we're for human flourishing. We just see reality in a way that we think is true to reality. Right. And you're seeing it in a different way. We're both for human flourishing. Can we talk about what that looks like? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's what they're buying into when they sit in their car on the text, and on their phone, while their girlfriend's in there getting an abortion. They're just completely buying into this whole mentality that, well, I can just do what I want. Yeah. And they're not thinking about, well, is this good for, my girlfriend? Is it good for me? Is it good for my neighborhood, my community, and society? Yeah. They don't have to think that way. Yeah. So I think human flourishing is at stake, but I don't know if you have anything more to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, underneath all of that is what came with the curse. And what motivated Adam and Eve to do what they did in the beginning? And that was, you can be like God. And
so we're going back to the foundation here of what we believe about the world, which is we're fallen because we want to be gods ourselves. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what does that mean? That means that, we love self. Yeah. And we will do anything we can to preserve self-love and what we want, our own autonomy, our own rules. And so abortion is a way to protect that. Yeah. Abortion is a way for both men and women to protect the God of self, our comforts, our desires, our rules, our wants, all of that. And so again, we get to push back on that a little bit.
That's good.
And show, at the end of the day, human flourishing comes, what is the purpose of the image of God in the earth to begin with? I mean, why was that important? And the whole idea of the image of God is taken from when kings would go in and conquer a land, they would create an image of themselves, an icon, a statue. And so people would look at that and they would see, okay, this land is, under the dominion of this king, this ruler. And the idea is that in us, that all of creation sees the good rule and reign of a creator, of a king, of God himself. And so to say we want human flourishing is to say we want the earth to be full of the glory of God. We want the whole earth to see the beauty of God, the good rule and reign of God. And so that absolves us as like, we're right, you're wrong,
right,
type mentality.
Yeah.
It's just, the only reason that I am who I am today is because of the grace of God.
Exactly.
I struggle with wanting to be my own God too.
Exactly. That's good.
And so I want God to be glorified in the earth. I want people to see the goodness of God, not the goodness of Josh or Love Life or my church or whatever. I want people to see the good rule and reign of God, and we demonstrate that when we follow his design.
That's good. Yeah, I like that, man. That's really helpful. I think we just got to keep holding up the banner for men to be involved in this issue.
Yeah.
But I want to take kind of a hard left turn here and maybe talk about some specific issues that are happening right now in our culture, and just kind of get your thoughts on this as well, because I think this is part of the conversation. Like you said, politics, maybe they're downstream a little bit, but they're also a part of the issue that's coming up. And so lately, what we've been seeing are celebrities and CEOs and all these different public petitions about the laws that are being passed in some of these states, like the heartbeat bills that are being passed in places like Alabama and other states, and Georgia as one. So a lot of pro-choice, pro-abortion folks have expressed outrage over the fact that a bunch of men are trying to make laws that oppress women against their bodily autonomy. And there's been outrage over the idea that, there's even no exception for rape and incest with these laws, but the men are making the decisions, they're dictating it. And so all these celebrities are involved and all that. What's your take on all of that? I don't know. I mean, how as men can we continue to speak into that issue? And what do you think? I don't know.
I think it's a lazy argument to say it's only men who are making these rules. I mean, obviously there are women involved that are pro-life and are voting in this legislation. And it really boils down to worldview, right? It's not like I'm sure there are politicians who leverage the issue, right, for votes and money. And that happens all across the board, regardless of party, regardless of gender, that's happening. But there are many who have a worldview that what's at stake is human lives.
Yeah.
And so like, I mean, really, it's like pick up a science book. The argument's not even, the whole idea, like when people say it's a clump of cells now, it's like, come on, like, your leading advocates in this movement don't even say that anymore.
Right.
Like science is far too advanced for us to say, and even if you're in question, it's like, people who hunt, if you're out hunting and you hear a rustling in the bushes, but you're not quite sure whether or not that's a deer, you shouldn't take that shot, right?
Exactly.
Unless you really know. And so, that I think it's a lazy argument just to say it's men who want control. And that's where, like, in our social media today, it's so easy to be a warrior on the keyboard. We really need to have a lot more face-to-face conversations. Let's go have coffee. Let's talk about this and understand. And when we get down to it, you're going to see a difference in worldviews. That's really where this boils down to. It's not, I care about white men being in control. It's, I have a worldview that says that from the point of conception, that is a uniquely created individual with its own DNA, its own organs, its own heartbeat, its own fingers and toes, that's made in the image of God, has intrinsic value and worth, and should not be killed. And if it is killed, it devalues all of us.
Right. Yeah.
Because, there was a council member Monday night at the city council meeting in Charlotte who made this grandiose speech about how we should have common ground in trying to help people while at the same time defending the killing of the innocent. And not understanding that if you don't value that life, why should any life be valued? Why is any life valuable at all?
Right.
Because you're always going to have a sliding scale. If you have some sort of caveat as to why that life isn't important. Well, who gets to determine that? And who gets to determine if we can move that scale? And that's where you see happening in European countries, where you're lessening the age of euthanasia, where you're trying to eliminate Down syndrome and all of these things. And so what eventually happens is all of life becomes devalued at some point.
I think that's really good. Let's dig into that a little bit more. We're going to take a short break.
Okay.
But let's pick it up there and talk more about what the implications of that are. Okay. We'll take a break and be right back. All right. Well, welcome back to the Empowered Advocate, where we've been talking with Josh Kappes of Love Life about why men should be involved in the abortion issue. And we were just talking about how there's a really flawed logic in trying to say that somebody's life is not valuable. And I think you were starting to get at the rape and incest issue as like that's something that pro-choice, pro-abortion folks often throw out there is like, well, we ought to make an exception for this, in cases of rape and incest. But what would you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think that as Christians, we should always first and foremost be very clear that our hearts are broken over the fact that someone may have been raped and or has been violated by a family member, and be very clear that we communicate that with whoever is saying that, even if it's an argument. I think we need to be clear that we care about that person as well, but then also be clear to say that you don't solve one evil by committing another evil. Yeah,
the way our client services director says it all the time is you don't want to have one trauma and then put another trauma on top of that.
Right.
So,
and statistically, I believe that most women, you can correct me if I'm wrong, most women who are raped still choose life, and those who don't regret it even more. That so now they're not only dealing with the trauma of rape, but they're dealing with the trauma of aborting a child as well, because no one is exempt from that. I don't care. The woman who walks in and gives me the finger and tells me that I should shut up because I don't have a uterus, to the one who goes in with the hoodie pulled over her head and tears in her eyes.
Right.
Every human being has a conscience, which means with knowledge, the law of God is written on our hearts and we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you can't participate in that without affecting your soul and your conscience and your mind. And so, I think that we need to be compassionate on the issue. The reality is too, and you know this, Carter, that those who throw that argument out, even if we gave a caveat for that argument, would still not, they would never turn around and say, okay, well, all abortion should be legal except for it. It's just an argument that gets thrown out there.
Yeah.
And so
just to throw us off. Yeah.
It's to me, it's similar to the one who says, well, why not help all the babies who are born? Well, yeah, we should.
And I think we do.
Not kill babies. Let's start there. Let's not kill babies.
Step number one, allow them to live.
Right.
Yeah.
And then let's work together
to
help people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, when I talked with that escort, same one that I mentioned, she brought up a lot of practical ways that we could be helping people and good points. And I said, we probably could do a lot together, but we've got to agree first that we shouldn't be killing babies in here. And she wasn't willing to do that. She kept referring to it as a procedure.
Right.
And I said, well, that's just semantics. And she said, well, no, it's just a procedure. And I said, well, I guess we are going to disagree on that. So.
That's the irony again. And that's why I keep harping on the human flourishing issue, because it's like, man, if you really value human life, the lives of all humans that are around you, then it can't be a procedure to you, because you're not only killing the life in the womb, but you're also traumatizing the mom, which devalues her as well. And you're just saying, well, this is like getting your tooth pulled. You can do this and it's no big deal. And it's like, whoa, no. You're totally underplaying the trauma that it's going to affect in her life, which is not helpful to her at all. And it's only going to cause problems for her later. Yeah. But I think something that you said maybe off the mic and off camera when we were chatting earlier was that this is like a modern day Holocaust, and then it's one of those issues where when people say, well, there has to be an exception here for any reason, then you're devaluing that person's life regardless of who they are, what circumstance they were conceived or whatever. Because during these conversations about the state laws that are being passed, starting with the New York law that was passed that, allowed everything up through the birth of the child. And now other states have followed that all the way to the other side of the spectrum with Georgia and Alabama and other states that are trying to pass laws to protect children in the womb. These conversations are being thrown out there. It's one of those issues where, man, you've got to agree that human lives have value. And when you don't, we can't, like you said, we can't really have a conversation. How can we move forward?
Yeah.
So
there's a thread that runs through all of this, through human history. And when you start saying, abortion is like modern day Holocaust or abortion is like slavery, people get bent out of shape sometimes about that. And how can you compare a child who's not even born to millions of black people who are hoarded as slaves or millions of Jews? But here's the thread. I'm not trying to draw apples to apples as far as the experience, but there's an underlying spiritual demonic ideology that runs through all of this. And that is, how were Jews referred to by Germans? They were Untermensch. They were subhuman.
Right.
There was one kind of human being that deemed another kind of human being as less valuable, and therefore they could be gassed, they could be hoarded and killed. In slavery, what motivated slavery except for this idea that certain people had the right and the authority to own and mistreat another a human being based on the color of their skin and where they came from.
Right.
And this goes back to Cain and Abel. I mean, Cain believed that his life was more valuable than his brother's, and he took it.
Yeah.
And that's the vacuum. When Adam and Eve said, we want to be gods, they ushered in this vacuum and this culture of death. We were meant to live under the good rule and reign of God according to his design. We chose not to. And as a result, this is what we get. But as the people of God now, we are bringing the kingdom of God on earth, and we are re-representing the good rule and reign of God. And we have to play the role of pushing back this culture of death. And we do it not only that we're not just activists, we're disciple makers. We're gospel proclaimers.
Yeah.
We not only want to see people choose physical life, we want to see people choose spiritual life, because that's the only thing that really is going to produce a long-term change in our culture is new hearts and new minds, is people being returned to the Father, having a relationship with God, having the Spirit of God in them, and living according to his good design. And as far as Hollywood goes, I wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I think that's good.
The church we got to get over our addiction of wanting to be liked by everybody. In fact, Jesus said the opposite. He said, woe unto you when all men speak well of you.
Wow.
And so, from a church perspective, I could care less about what Hollywood does or doesn't do.
But it's interesting that they have that sway over our culture, isn't it? Because it's frustrating to me. I'm like, what do I care about what some actor who has no background in medical history, no background with any kind of science or anything like that, he says his opinion and all of a sudden, or she says her opinion and all of a sudden, wow, we need to get on board with that. It makes, it's crazy to me.
I think that when we do have politicians who are strong and who are willing to stand in the face of economic consequences to standing on what is right, we have to support them.
Yeah.
We need to make our support of them clear.
That's good.
Because they're typically probably are only going to hear the negative, and they've got to hear from us saying, thank you. Thank you for standing on what is true, on what is good, on what is right. I remember having a conversation with Lieutenant Governor Forrest several years ago when the whole bathroom bill was raging. And I remember him saying, we don't really care. We're going to do what's right. We're going to do what's good for people. And
which that's how men should be leading, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Based off of what you said at the very beginning, based off of what's right, not what's popular, not what the culture says, not what, people raging say, well, you don't have a say in this because you're not the right gender or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Got to be willing to stand up for what's right in that.
Yeah. Jesus leads the way. I mean, we want to know what a man looks like. Jesus leads the way. Christianity, it's so easy. People want to say we're chauvinist and man domineering and pluck scriptures out of the Bible. But Jesus was so countercultural in the way that he dealt with women, the way he engaged with women, the way he served them, the way that he treated them. I mean, the way that, of just conversation and touch. Think of the woman at the well and what it would have been like for her to have a man actually look at her in the face and see her for who she was and not want anything from her. And
much less have a conversation with her.
Give her life.
Wow.
You think of how she had been used up until that point.
Yep.
And what she was looking for. And so, if we want to see what a man looks like, we got to first look to Jesus and the way that he was bold, he was courageous, he stood up to injustice and things like that, but he was also humble and meek and the perfect man.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's good, man. I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. Do you have a call to action for men at this point, Christian men, or really any men? I mean, I guess, we're coming at it uniquely from a Christian perspective, obviously, but maybe if you can speak to the Christians and then to any man as a call to action for why they ought to be involved in this and how they can do that. And then we'll close out our time.
Yeah, I think be self-aware. We talked about the two ways that men swing, right? Passivity or the domineering side. Mm-hmm. And I think be aware of which way you swing.
That's good.
Definitely swing to the passive side. I come home from work. It's really easy for me to turn the TV on, get on my phone, put my feet up, not want to engage with my family.
Yeah.
So being aware of that and just be praying, God, turn my heart towards home, turn my heart towards my family, turn my heart towards people, and help me to be free from these two dangers of domineering or passivity, and then show me where to engage. And I think, again, I represent Love Life, but I just think our prayer walks are the starting point to open people's eyes to what's happening, and that be a springboard for ministry. And it doesn't even have to be pro-life ministry. Like, I think there's great power in just showing people, like, when you show up into dark places and you pray, God responds and miracles happen. And, you can do that at the strip club. You can do that in places around Greensboro where there's poverty. Like, there's all kinds of places that we can engage, but do something. Like, don't settle for, the doofuses that are portrayed on TV, that men are, we got our head in the sand. We don't know what's going on with our family. Our wives are running and doing everything.
Guys caught up in the blinds in the background.
Yeah, right. There is greatness that God has shaped us for in how we lead and take initiative. And that really is the thing, is like, to lead out, to engage, to have the hearts of our families, to be aware of the hearts of our families, and then to look around and serve. And so in this, there's great need here at the center for men to be discipling men, mentoring men. There's great need within local churches for that to take place. Yep. And so come out to a prayer walk, come out to a Saturday prayer walk. It doesn't have to be your church's week. Come and see what takes place and see the body of Christ coming together, and watch what happens when we stand together and we pray and we worship and God responds and people are saved, and see the battle too. I think, there's something within us as men to fight. Yeah. And if we have that we're engaged mentality in a battle, it awakens that in us. And so come see the spiritual warfare that's at place. I mean, you're going to see people in rainbow vests acting a fool, but they're not the issue. There is a Chad Harvey from RFA in Raleigh preached a powerful, powerful message 2 Sundays ago. And he talked about the demonic principalities that are involved in this issue of abortion. And when you take that into consideration, all of the crazy behavior we see, all of the ideology that we hear, all of the, there was a sign Monday night that said pro-choice is pro-life. Like, all of that silliness that you hear, when you see the demonic, you understand the demonic involvement, the Molech and Baal and Asherah from the Bible, they're still alive and well today. And they're at play in all of this stuff. And as men, when we come out and you participate in the prayer walks, you see that battle, you see that warfare. It awakens you to the reality that life is more than a paycheck. It's more than work. It's more than making it to the weekend. There is a battle at stake for our lives, for our families, and we've got to be awake. We got to be aware, and we got to be engaged. And so come to the prayer walk, come see that, come get woke, as they say, and then go from there, man. Pray while you're at the prayer walk. God, what are you calling me to? Like, what do you want me to engage in? And get beyond video games and television and all that stuff that a lot of times we as men settle for. Yeah, and go for greater things.
That's good, man.
With God.
I really think that's powerful. I think, I love going out to the Love Life prayer walks and being out there. So I would highly recommend that to anybody who wants to get involved. They can go to lovelife.org. Is that the website that they can go check out Love Life and see where we are in the city and where all of the prayer walks meet at Charlotte, Greensboro, and Raleigh. And if you're somewhere else in the country and you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, then man, go pray out in front of your local abortion facility and get it started. So that's a really good word, man. That's good action steps for us to follow. But let's go ahead and wrap it up, man. Josh, it's been a pleasure having you
Likewise.
here. Really appreciate having you on the Empowered Advocate this segment. So wish you guys well and everything that you're doing. Love our partnership.
Yeah, we can't say enough about you guys and
appreciate that.
What Greensboro PCC means to this city. And
that's good.
I've got to meet a lot of different directors and been around a lot of ministries. And I've said this to you guys face to face, but I'll say it again. You guys are top notch in everything that you do. You do everything with excellence. You guys have literally shifted your entire ministry to be out at the sidewalks, to take your mobile unit out there. Yeah. And man, we are forever grateful for that and love working with you guys. So
I appreciate that, man. I'm glad for you guys to be in here as well. So look forward to talking to you more in the future. I'm sure we'll have you guys back on our podcast at some point, but love you, bro. And thanks for being here.
Thanks.
So if you guys want to make sure that you subscribe, hope that you will. Don't forget to subscribe to the Empowered Advocate. Hope you'll listen again. But we appreciate you listening or watching. So thanks. We'll see you next time.